welcome to In the Den with Dr. Jenn. Thank you. So our topics today, is everyone naturally sexual or are some folks asexual? What shock of a lifetime did a recent Zimbabwe man receive? And I talk about the controversial book Sex at Dawn. Now also, this episode, I have a sidekick, yes, my very own Ed McMahon or Andy Richter, to add his perspective to these topics. So we'll see what he has to say. Stay tuned. Our Den chat today. Sex is great. It's fun, it's natural, it's normal, it connects us, it can be procreative, it's amazing. But what if it isn't? What if you just find yourself over a long period of time with no interest in sex or sexual spark? Or you've never really felt desire to connect sexually with another person? Could you be asexual? Do you think you're asexual?
At times, yeah. Probably more asymptomatic, though.
So there's actually an organization called AVEN, the Asexual Visibility and Education Network. And on their website, they write, this is very interesting, I learned a lot. AVEN strives to create open, honest discussion about asexuality among sexual and asexual people alike. And unlike celibacy, you might be confusing it with that, which is a choice, asexuality is a sexual orientation. I think that's fascinating.
I'm thrown by that.
Okay, listen, there's more. Asexual people have the same emotional needs as everybody else and are just as capable of forming intimate relationships. There's considerable diversity among the asexual community. So each asexual person experiences things like relationships, attraction, and arousal somewhat differently. And asexuality is just beginning to be the subject of research, really just in the past 5-8 years. And so this is something I think is particularly interesting. Most people who are affiliated with this organization have been asexual for their entire lives.
Wow.
I know, and so they actually see it as an identity. Folks who identify as asexual have relationships like the rest of us sexual folks.
But does that mean like they tried it and didn't like it?
Well, so interesting.
Or did they just never take their clothes off?
Just never had an interest to do so. And so they form, you know, the same type of intimate relationships and closeness. They just don't have a need or desire to make it sexual. And they actually may occasionally experience arousal, but without that desire to experience partnered sexual activity.
Kind of like me as a gay man hanging out with you.
Yes.
You're attractive, especially in red.
Yeah, I know. I work for you. Yes.
And I may occasionally get aroused, but I'm not really interested.
Maybe.
Maybe. No, I'm not. Don't tell me when I'm aroused. I know.
A British study a few years ago stated that the prevalence of asexuality could actually be upwards of 1% of the population, which is quite a bit. So,
but couldn't this just be a break? Like a period where you just, can you go in between?
No, in general, no. Like I don't.
Like if you had a bad experience, you just want to take a time off.
It seems to be often
maternity leave.
That would be chosen celibacy.
Chosen.
And
celibacy.
this is considered not a choice, which is why they're identifying it as a sexual orientation.
And whoa. Yeah. Might counseling ever be involved? I mean, might someone think, well, maybe in fact there is something that's holding me back?
Yes, and so
like tight jeans, for instance.
They actually did a very interesting research study, and they took a bunch of women that identified as heterosexual, bisexual, lesbian, and asexual, and linked them up to measure their vaginal flow, and then also took subjective feedback from them, and then showed them porn or something like that. That's what they always like to show them in these lab settings.
Nothing else really works.
Often, yeah, not in the same way, and the visual stimuli. And they found that the women that identified as asexual really had the same feedback.
They were turned on.
They were turned on. However, they didn't perceive it necessarily as a positive thing.
Yeah, so maybe they had a bad experience, right?
So they actually...
Because to be turned on, but kind of hold yourself back?
It doesn't translate, because sometimes they will masturbate, it doesn't translate to wanting to have partnered sexual activity.
Okay, so maybe just masturbating.
Sometimes,
like,
yeah.
Indefinitely.
I don't, it wouldn't be like you.
Well, that's true.
With your drive doing that, so.
You're right.
I can only imagine, we live in such a sexual society that, like, it would be very difficult and feel very different to grow up like this and grow up with your peers. And I read some stories of folks that they're like, everybody else around them, they're growing up and they're teenagers, everybody's talking about sex, and they figured they were faking it, you know, and that they weren't really that interested. And then they realized, oh, all these people really are very interested, and I'm just not.
But it sounds like you're saying they can still be sexual, just not with another person.
They just don't want to.
But with another person.
Yes.
So they could watch porn or be turned on. And
I think there's just not much of a drive to do that at all. I know it's
maybe
blowing
they need
your
to
mind.
cut back on their work hours. I don't know.
So, I mean, it was, right? Some folks want to label it a sexual dysfunction, but some of the latest research...
I'm not implying that.
It's... Didn't mean to put a label on you putting a label.
Yes, please don't.
But yeah, but it doesn't seem to be. The latest research seems to show, and that's why it's showing up as an identity and a sexual orientation. So, yeah, it's not necessarily a difference. Also, is that sometimes folks that are in long-term relationships may feel asexual, right? They have no spark or drive anymore, but that's often perceived as problematic. And for folks that are identifying as asexual, it's not perceived as problematic. It's just, my guess is if they've never felt that, you wouldn't miss it, right? Because you have nothing else to compare to. So.
And do they claim that they would never like to try?
Yeah, it's just
the ones you've interviewed?
Not an interest. I didn't interview anybody. I was just reading this. Oh, shut up.
Expert.
Shut up. So if this topic has piqued your interest, or this resonates with you personally, you can go to asexuality.org to learn more. Our sexual fun fact, I love this one. Recently, a man in Zimbabwe got the shock of a lifetime when the female prostitute he ordered arrived. What was that shock? A, it was an undercover sting operation. B, she was really a man. Or C, it was his daughter.
Really a man? Yes.
No, behind you.
It was what?
C, it was actually his daughter. And this married father of 3 was having some problems at home and decided to check into a hotel room and order a prostitute. He collapsed in shock when his daughter arrived. Can you imagine? And she immediately ran off. I'm like, awkward.
Yeah, can you imagine? I love just sitting on the dinner conversation that evening.
Well, and I wonder...
How was your day?
I'm wondering how it got out to the press, you know? And I mean, he apologized to his family publicly, I mean, because there was news stories about it. He said his daughter's going back to school next year, and that he and his wife are counseling, they're in counseling now to address their relationship concerns.
Wow.
Yeah, that's just...
I've been to Zimbabwe. I saw that.
You have not.
I was in the room next door.
The Den recommend Sex at Dawn, The Prehistoric Origins of Modern Sexuality. I liked this book, and I did have some problems with it though, but I'll get to them later. The authors, who are a research psychologist and a practicing psychiatrist, have a main premise that humans are not naturally monogamous creatures. I bet you like that.
I've felt that for years.
Yes. And that we're actually quite similar in this way to bonobos, one of our closest primate relatives. Now, the authors criticize the mainstream narratives around the development of human sexuality and argue that prehistoric humans were quite egalitarian, including sharing sexual partners. But the rise of agriculture, with the decline of nomadic, hunter-gatherer human communities, really created the need for monogamy because of private property. Now, the authors use research evidence that they claim has been minimized by mainstream arguments, and they pull from anthropology, archaeology, sociology, primatology, anatomy, and psychosexuality. And not only are they questioning assumptions around monogamy and ownership, but whether humans are naturally warlike. They actually claim that we're naturally promiscuous, and they mean that in a positive way, loving, generous, and cooperative, but have designed our societies in ways that have lost sight of that. What do you think?
Yes.
That was insightful. And I think that perhaps this explains our hypersexual nature, high divorce rates, sexless marriages, and high infidelity rates. Now, their writing style is funny. You'd probably like it. But I did have some problems with the mocking and sarcastic tone that the authors used, and that some of their arguments actually had the same flaws in logic that they were critiquing in other researchers. And while the writing style was easygoing, kept my interest, they used exaggerated and overly emotional analogies or language, such as when they were addressing control over women's sexuality, they write, "Why the electrified high-security razor wire fence to contain a kitty cat?" And they wrote, "Homo sapiens evolved to be shamelessly, undeniably, inescapably sexual, lusty libertines, rakes, rogues, and roués." I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. "Tomcats and sex kittens, bitches in heat." And they also said, "Darwin says your mother's a whore." Simple as that.
Very sophomoric.
Yeah, so there's I think a lot of the...
immature.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So I actually think that this undermined their argument to use that type of language, that overly emotional language. It was almost sort of like propaganda.
And yet you claim you like the book?
I do. Nonetheless, I recommend it because I think if you're interested in this topic, if you've ever thought that maybe sexual relationships weren't meant to be monogamous or for a lifetime, or if you want to be challenged outside the box to question...
Whose box?
Your box, specifically.
I don't have a box.
No, you don't. Society has a box around sexuality, human sexuality, and what
Yes.
we's been taught. I
That
think this
box.
really challenges that. So have I piqued your interest to read the book?
No.
Is it because you already think this way?
No, it's because you started by saying I have problems with this book. Why do I want to listen after that?
I liked this book, and I did have some problems with it, though. No, because it was really fascinating. They
No,
had
it may have
a ton
been,
of
but
research,
as
a ton of research. It was very interesting.
And there were no pictures.
No, there are no pictures. It's true. That's it.
How do I understand their point without photos?
No, it's true. I understand.
And I wanted to see the bonobos going at it. You said
Bonobos.
Bonobos?
Isn't it? Is it bonobos? Oh, crap.
Audience, bonobos or hunhobos?
Bonobos.
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 Bonobos. So they're promiscuous?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, why did they have photos of that?
Go online for that. Google
Okay,
images.
Excellent.
Okay, in conclusion, I'd like to thank our live audience for being here to talk about sex, and Sean Worley for whatever it is that you just provided. You can find me online at drjensden.com and on Facebook and Twitter at drjensden. Or get in touch with me if you want some one-on-one counseling in person or via Skype, or if you're in need of a university speaker on sexuality or gender. Now, don't miss the funny or outrageous, no doubt, outtake after the credits, and as always, be kind to yourself. Hey, welcome to In the Den with Dr. Jenn. That's when you guys clap. All right, too late. No, you lost your chance.